All right. Well, this time I'd like to welcome in my guest. Chad Hermansen is with us today. He is a former first round draft pick in the major leagues, and currently he is involved in a program that he's doing called Mental Edge Training. But I wanted to bring Chad on because I love sports and I obviously love psychology. So I wanted to get his take on some things and just kind of learn more about what he's doing for kids and yeah, just get some of his input on things. So thanks again, Chad, for coming on.
Thanks, Ryan. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah. All right. So you want to just tell us a little bit about what you're doing right now with your program and just a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, I mean, it all stems from, my background of playing baseball. And then now I'm a father. I have a father of 4 kids. I have one son who's been playing baseball since he was a little boy. And going through the struggles that I went through, that you kind of, those are mental struggles. You have some athleticism. I played all 3 sports growing up. I did well in all these sports. And then you kind of get to the point later in your career that you're like, man, I'm kind of struggling a little bit, and you kind of start to have some failure and you start second guessing yourself. And I started to see that happen with my son. Kind of the story goes, it was last year, he was a sophomore in high school and he was going through some struggles. He was a starter is on the varsity team as a freshman, which is pretty good. That's most kids would say, yeah, it's pretty good. You're starting on varsity as a freshman. Had a pretty good freshman year. And then of course you want to do better your sophomore year, right? You start kind of aligning up your goals and maybe setting wrong goals. I want to hit for a higher average, things that are kind of out of your control. And he started to struggle his sophomore year and started to get into these things where he was comparing himself and had to put a ton of stress, ton of pressure and anxiety before games, just trying to live up to expectations because he went to the same school as I did. And so being a first round pick, all these things were happening. So he was struggling with that, which, I think is it's kind of almost not fair, so, and I started to kind of notice. So once he started to open up to me about some of the things that he was going through, and I was noticing I was able to help him. I was able to help him walk through some of these things, give him some tips, some strategies, some skills to start working on and applying that I wish I had, when I was playing. I started struggling a lot after I was drafted as a first round pick. So there's high expectations, right? So when I got it.
I was going to say, just to interrupt a little bit, I was thinking when I first asked you to come in, I didn't really think about it that much. And I was like, wait a second, he was a first round draft pick. Can you talk a little bit about that pressure? I'm sure that was immensely.
Well, yeah. So, I was drafted in 95 and, if you're a first round pick, you're still getting really good money. It's 7 figures. If you're in a certain area now, it's a little different system in 2020. I think the top pick, they have a slot system now. It's roughly 7 or 8 million. Doesn't mean the team's going to give that to you, but so there's obviously, when you're picked in that spot, you're expected to make the big leagues and you're expected to have a huge impact on an organization. So I was totally cool with that. I was 17 years old when I was drafted. I was like, dude, I'm the man. I'm going to be the guy and handle this. And for the most part, I felt like I did a pretty good job of that. I always hit offensively, but I really struggled defensively. And in particular, throwing from shortstop. So you could say I had the thing, the monster, all the. What's that?
The Chuck Knobloch, didn't he struggled throwing it to second or whatever? Yeah, that thing.
Yeah, just constantly in worry of performance, of trying to be perfect in everything I did, and it really got to me, and it got to the point where the game wasn't fun for me anymore. And so after trying to battle through the minor leagues of this particular issue, having sleepless nights, having anxiety, but bottling it all in, didn't really tell anybody. All the other people, coaches, teammates knew that, man, he's struggling to throw the ball to first base. It's all over the place. It's really hard, coming across the diamond, but man, we're losing games. So it really bothered me that I was a part of a game that we had lost because of what I did. And so after a while, about 2 years of battling that, by the time I was 19 in AA, I finally had enough of, because I tried to work through it, and it was still the tips and ideas and all these things from coaches. It just wasn't working, but nothing was done on the mental side. It was all about the actions of, mechanics of throwing and where your feet are lined up. And but nobody was getting in my dome in regards to just being able to talk about what I was going through.
Mm.
And so I dealt with that. And I finally said, enough's enough. Get me in the outfield where I feel more comfortable, because I could run. I ended up, getting to the big leagues as a center fielder. And I just felt that was more my natural position anyway. So I kind of didn't really have that belief in myself that I was going to be a big league shortstop.
Mm.
So I saw these other Latin guys playing, and I was like, man, I'm pretty good. I was the first shortstop taken in the draft that year as a 17-year-old. So the industry was telling me how good I was, but I didn't quite believe it on my end. And so that's kind of where things started to kind of get in trouble for myself.
So what do you think the separation was for you? Where did that fall short? I mean, because it sounds like, obviously you did well in high school and were pretty successful enough to be touted as a number one pick. So where do you, was it just that people didn't talk about it enough, or, as far as like the mental side, or where do you think it was falling short for you?
Well, we didn't talk about it at all.
Okay.
This was 95, 96, 97.
Mm-hmm.
So you could say there was sports psychologists at that point. It was kind of starting to be prevalent. But I certainly didn't seek anybody out because I thought that would mean that I had a weak mindset, that I was a weak person. And
Mm-hmm.
so you just kind of tried to battle through it. And
Yeah.
then now you fast forward it to 2020, almost every major league team has a mental skills coach. But I want to make sure people understand that a mental skills coach and a sports psychologist, those are really two separate things, right? So
Yeah.
now my work I'm doing with my kids, I am not a sports psychologist, right? I do not have a degree in sports psychology, but I'm learning by talking to other coaches under mental skills coach you kind of mesh them together, if you will, and you start to learn how to communicate and have conversation with kids and start asking them questions. Because the hardest part with kids is they have to be willing and vulnerable to open up. Right. And I'm struggling with this. And so that's what I've been trying to do is help piece that together, give them skills, some strategies on what they can do, and, try to work through a model of helping them.
Okay. So what would you say then what is that difference, or how could people understand it better, like a mental skills coach versus a sports psychologist, just in case people are still unclear about that?
Yeah, I would say it's more about performance-based as a mental skills coach. So you give them a skill, something to work on, to do something that's actionable. And that's where I think kids get the hang up, where you think about a psychologist. I think our brains automatically go to, okay, I got to go to this guy's house or this office and go lay on a couch and spill the beans on everything, since I was 3 or 5 years old. And that's not what a mental skills coach does, right? That's you're trained to do that, right? You're diving in deep.
Right.
So there's parts of what we do that can go into that. And once the kid starts opening up, then you can kind of start piecing together, okay, you're struggling with this part. Let's implement this skill and start working on maybe your focus, a belief system, something in there that can help you. So I do believe it's all about the inner self-image, building that confidence, and just kind of get them on the right track.
Right. So one of the things, and not to put you on the couch or anything, but just when you look back on your time, and like you said, that time between 17 and 19 when you were struggling with throwing the ball to from short and stuff, what do you feel like you could have benefited more from in that time, just from your own personal standpoint? I know it's looking back, but what did you you lacked or didn't have or could have used in for yourself?
Well, yeah, there was a belief that I didn't believe I could play shortstop at that level.
Okay.
Right. So there was that faith in the belief in myself. So that's where I struggled. And there's, when you start getting to pro ball, there you see that first baseman, and then behind that first baseman, there's people, right? There's kids. And I think one of my issues personally was, I don't know if it stemmed from this, and maybe it did, but I threw a ball, overthrew it, and I hit like an older lady, right? And that really bothered me, you know, because I love and care about people, and probably too much, you know, as a player. And so there was something in there kind of behind in my mindset that every time I threw over to first base, I hope I don't hurt anybody.
Right.
So I think that stems into trying to be perfect, the perfectionist type of athlete. And yeah, so that's when you get into that, you know, phase of trying to be perfect in everything you do and so concerned about the outcome, you forget about the process of what you have to do to make a play and kind of go pitch to pitch.
Yeah. So like when you talk about that belief, I've heard a couple of podcasts you've been on, and that's something that you talked about before, where it's like, you didn't have that belief. I think later on in your journey, you've talked about how they wanted to maybe even try you at second base. Right. And I think that was when I heard you say it one time too. It's like, well, I didn't even have the belief I could be a second baseman either. So like in my mind, I'm thinking like I had a friend growing up in high school, and he was a star quarterback, and he was, you know, a baseball player and whatever, and was touted over and stuff like that. In my mind, I think there's no way he could have lacked a belief of doing something, you know. So I'm thinking you probably were made to feel a similar way. So where did that belief go away, do you think? Or was it just like maybe being tested at a different level once you got to the majors? Or what do you think happened in that state?
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, I had so much success up to being a first round pick, and I wasn't a great shortstop. I mean, I was pretty good in high school. I was a good athlete. So I went from the outfield and did my thing. And then once you start making 20, 30, 40, 50 errors through the whole season at shortstop, you know, and what I also wish too is I wish I would have been able to figure it out, because that Derek Jeter, who was a Hall of Famer, did the exact same thing, right? He made 56 errors one year. But I also understand that he had a support system to help get him through that, you know, where he played for the Yankees, so he's going to have everything available, but it still is on that person. You know, it's still my responsibility. But I think at the end of the day, it all stems back for me is I wanted to be a center fielder.
Okay.
Right. So that was kind of when I was a junior in high school, our shortstop had graduated, and I played for Coach Fairless out here, who's a Hall of Fame coach. He came to me after that sophomore year. He said, "You're going to be my shortstop the next year." And okay, awesome. You know, so you're a kid, you just want to play, right? You just do what you need to do. And he helped turn me into the best shortstop prospect in the country. So that was awesome. But there was also that mindset for me that, okay, I guess I can play some short, you know, but I really want to be in center field, you know? So and maybe that's not the answer. I don't know, but yeah, I know when I went to the field, knowing I was going to be in center field, it was just a much freeing. I didn't have that interference in my mindset that I did at shortstop.
Right. You're not going to be thrown into the stands and hitting somebody in center field, right?
But let's hope not. And I really, at the end of the day, my players that really know me well, I was never really an accurate thrower. I would describe myself as a chucker. You know, just throw it as hard as I can, and it's coming out firm. And obviously, that just plays a lot better in the outfield.
Right. Yeah, less precise, I guess, right? Well, that's cool. So any other, as far as then, so just kind of taking us through a little bit of that journey then. So you got drafted by the Pirates, you kind of had that transition to the outfield, and then what was the rest of your time kind of like? You ended up going to some other teams and some other things. I mean, what was that process like for you in general?
Yeah, so I shot up through the system. I got up to AAA when I was 20. One of the youngest players in AAA that year, hit 28 home runs. Next year as a 21-year-old, and at that point I was playing second base a little bit. That was when they were still trying to do that experiment. Look, we haven't figured this out. now I'm at second base. This is even worse. Now I'm closer. So it's really weird how it all works. But I finally moved to the outfield officially that year. At this point, I was like one of the one or two top prospects for the Pirates in the late 90s at this point. And went to AAA my second year. Did even better. Hit 32 home runs that year. Playing center field every an all-star, all that stuff. And then I get my first call up when I was 21. It's kind of a long backstory, but another big part of what was really difficult for me is my second day in the big leagues. My hitting coach at this point noticed that I was doing some things, what we would call really hitting down on the ball, over-exaggerating, hitting down and through the ball. Because a year earlier, I was told that you got your lead elbow. My lead elbow was we call this a chicken wing. Now people call it a launch angle swing, where the bat kind of works back this way. And we were trying to get it to go that way. So in order for me to do that, I had to think down and through the baseball. So that's what I did my whole second year. But in practice, in flips, tee work, I really over-exaggerated this down motion, because when I got into the game, I felt like it leveled out in what we would call getting on, playing with the pitch, but trying to backspin the ball and stay through it. So my coach noticed this in it was my second day in the big leagues, as we're hitting in the tunnels, and I'm pounding balls really down low, backspinning them, and he kind of, after about 10 swings, he looks at me, he's like, "What are you doing?" And my eyes went like this, like, what do you mean? So to kind of give perspective, I'm 21 years old. The big league hitting coach is telling me, "What are you doing?" And then the key words that he said to me was like, "You cannot hit like that here." And so I'm just like, oh crap.
Yeah.
I'm like a yes sir guy, like totally respectful of what his opinion is. I'm like, what the thoughts that were going through my mind was like, well, you told me a year ago I had too much kind of lift in my swing, and you wanted me to kind of square it up, and so I did that. I did that the second year in AAA. You saw the numbers, like, what's happening here, right?
Yeah.
So he wanted me to kind of, he felt I was way too over exaggerating this, and I didn't really explain it. I'm like, okay, yes sir, what do I do? Hit up through the ball more, get the ball in the air, which led to me, and this is on me, just led me to believe that, oh crap, like I'm screwed, because I know I can't hit like that. I got to stay with what I did, because I just spent a whole year and a million swings trying to get this swing down. So I went back to this old style in the big league. So it's like I was trying something new right away, and it was not a good result. So that, and the reason I point that out, again, it's on me. Like, I'm 21, but yeah, I'm listening to my coach. But I should have known who I was at that point, and had more faith and confidence in myself to be like, obviously 30-year-old me would have been like, no, I'm going to hit how I know how to hit. Like, This is how I got to the big leagues. But I didn't have that as a youngster. 21, most kids are in college at this point, and I'm in the big leagues. So it really messed with me, my confidence, and it dropped my confidence way down. And I really battled with that my whole big league career. My big league window was from age 21 to 25. And I played with 4 different teams during that time. And so once I left the Pirates, I was kind of more of a role player, a 4th, 5th outfielder at that point, and my at-bats dropped way off at that point. So I struggled. I was one of those players that went up and down between the big leagues and AAA. Like you mentioned the word embarrassed earlier, I think, and I was completely embarrassed, getting sent up and down, because you feel like you're a failure, every time you get sent down.
Is that, yeah, as I say, that's, sure, like going up and going up and going down, that's a difficult, even psychologically, mentally, kind of, it's hard to kind of do that. And is it always, are you kind of always carrying with you that feeling of like, here I am, a first round pick? Like, is that kind of going with it? I'm
Oh, yeah.
assuming it's probably never leave,
And
right? We're still
when it really got hard for me is that when I was up and down so much, you only have so many lives. There's comes a time and a point where a team is going to let you go. And prior to the Pirates trading me, this was about the year 2002. I was out of options. They couldn't send me down anymore. If they were to send me down, they had to send me through waivers, which allows a team to basically pick you up for nothing. So they let me play throughout that whole year. And ironically, the whole year I was in the big leagues, I had a torn labrum in my shoulder, but we didn't know it at the time. They masked it with some shots to the arm, cortisone to get me through that. So I battled that my whole year in the big leagues that year. But my point with that was once I got sent down, trying to build yourself back up, because you could go down and have a lot of success in AAA, right? But then when we got back up to the big leagues, that average, if you're hitting 180, 190, that's still there. Right. So you look up at that and you're like, oh yeah, I wasn't very good when I went down to AAA, did pretty well. Now I'm back up here. Like I kind of, so all of that self-talk, right, that negative vibe that's going on through yourself, that kind of starts to manifest itself. So I think what happens is you start, at least I did, I started to try even harder. Right. So I guess I'll just try even harder. I'll try to hit the ball harder. And that does not work in baseball.
No. Well, so when you look at like you were saying before about kind of what you see in teams now, and you do scouting for the Angels, right? So you're a little bit involved with like, I mean, do you see the major league club, or like you around them, or you're just out on your own thing or whatever?
Yeah, completely on the amateur side with high school kids and college kids.
Okay. So I mean, but I don't know if you have any windows into it, but when you think of it, like you said before, like teams now, they have all their mental skills coaches and stuff like that. And I'm assuming that maybe in some situations, maybe not everybody, but players are more open to talk about things that they're going through. I mean, would you say, is that a fair thing, or is that?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Cause there's been a shift in that mindset of, and again, I think the biggest shift still is, if I go to somebody, that means there's something wrong with me, and that's not the case. So we try to take the complete judgment, the shame of going to talk to somebody. It's more somebody to talk to, somebody that's been through it, and then you give them something to do.
Yeah.
Right. And you're not yelling at them. You're basically a coach, and you just kind of remain neutral in what they're telling you, and then try to help give a solution. Try to help them figure it out themselves.
Yeah.
Give them, okay, the obstacles are going to be there. What do you think about this? What do you, in your opinion, how would you handle this? So those are the conversations I have. And I'm sure these players at the big league level are having that too, but they're there. I don't know if they're actually talking to them every single day. I've had a couple on my show that I'm trying to get a better feel for what they're doing. Whether it's a program, something they can do, and then they leave and then come back a couple weeks later and they can kind of hash out, have you been working on this stuff? What are you improving on? Things like that.
Okay. So you mentioned the story like too with your son and kind of what he was going through. So what do you see like in kids that you work with right now, and kind of like what are some of the things that they do struggle with that maybe they're going to need help with, I guess, or is there a common theme? I'm sure, there's a or whatever, but I don't know if there is a common theme, or just, I guess, what are some of the things you see in them?
Yeah, just in the, some of the conversations I've had too, perfectionism is a huge thing. Trying to just make every single play perfectly, make every throw perfectly as a pitcher, trying to, they think they're going to hit that spot every time. So their goals, then that they have high expectations too, so there's trying to find that fine line of like, look, this game is really hard. Like we played it as kids, and sometimes we make it even harder because of this interference and trying to get back to what that feeling was like as a kid that you just went out and played. Comparison I see is a big issue. comparing, because now you have, I mean, there was rankings back when I played. The Baseball America was out there, all these things. But now you have a whole bunch of different rankings, social media. So, and people are only posting their best hits, their best, their hardest velocity of pitch, things of this nature. So it kills them in their self-doubt, because when they feel like they're not, adding up, or I'm not in the top 10 in Las Vegas, or the top 100 here, they start to get down on themselves. So just kind of going back to that focus and just making sure they're focusing on the right things and eliminating the stuff that just doesn't matter.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's really good. Cause like you said, I mean, there's only a certain amount of things that you can control, and there's going to be mistakes. And just, that's the one thing that, I mean, I coached a little bit with my son up through Little League. I know that's not a big deal, but up through majors and stuff. And then that's when I'm like, you need to go have somebody else coach you or whatever. But even in that time, I mean, you see kids, like whether it's like you said, that perfectionism or that need to be perfect, or if they do make a mistake, that they don't bounce back from that mistake very well. It's like, they lose it, and they're just, and these are kids, like some of the kids that, especially I had on my son's 12-year major team, because, we had a good group of kids and we had some really good players, but there's a couple of them in particular that if they made a mistake, it was like that, they were just done. Like that was it. Like there was no bouncing back from that. And like, so some of that stuff, like where, that, I guess it's like the mental toughness, or the ability to be okay with mistakes and realize it's not the end of the world. And I don't know, how do you work anything with that with kids, or do you know what I mean? Do you work with that, or just the skill stuff?
Yeah, it's all a combination of that. So kind of teaching them how to, baseball, you have to play pitch to pitch, and you have to have a short memory. So when you're playing pitch to pitch, you're in the process of, you're in the present. And obviously you want to play baseball in a subconscious level. So that's why we practice so much, right? That's why we take all those ground balls. That's why we take all those swings. And you might be able to kind of think about maybe your mechanics, what you're doing while practicing. But when you get into that game, you have to just play, right? So you want to just be reactionary and just do it. So that's why practice is so important. You got to have all this repetition, the perfect practice makes perfect type thing. But yeah, that's why when kids don't work at their game, and then they just go, a lot of the showcase scene is really big, right? So an example would be this summer, and I'll just use my son as an example. They have a tournament this week or next week. We've been in COVID, pandemic for months. If he hasn't done anything for a month and expects to walk into next week's tournament and be successful, I mean, that's likely not going to happen, right? So it's getting them into routines, understanding how, like AM, PM routines work. So those are other skills to work on. But yeah, back to that process and not worrying so much about what the outcome is, but playing the game pitch to pitch.
Yeah, I like that. It's a good mantra to kind of keep with them, and just, hey, the next pitch, the next whatever, you have an opportunity to do something different, or to do it again, or to whatever, right? So, and even like on the hitting end, it's like, okay, you leave one pitch, it's like you've got the next pitch. It's not the end of the world, even if it's a strike that goes by you, whatever, you can make an adjustment or get the timing or whatever, and take your next crack, right?
Yeah, that's the thing with this game. Baseball is so much different from football and basketball. It's the average that we always tend to really focus on, the average in baseball. And we all know it. 3 out of 10, you're a really good player, right? That's at the big league level. 4 out of 10 in high school, you're really good. 5 out of 10 in little league, you're really good. And once those numbers start to kind of back up, and you're like, oh man, now I'm only like 2 out of 10. So it just crushes you, and it's so much failure. So that's the curse, and I think also the blessing of baseball, and that's why the life lessons come in, because whether you're in sales, what you're doing something in life, you're not going to succeed every time.
Mm.
Like you said, building that mental toughness, that resiliency to just, put the armor on and go to battle and know that it's not going to work out every time for you.
Yeah. And I think the other thing too is like when you have kids and you kind of, when you see them go through stuff, it's also important. And hopefully they understand it too. Like I remember when I was coaching my son that year when he was 12, it's like, and I came to practice late this day, and my assistant was helping, and he comes running up to me and he's like, "Hey, I hit my first home run out, whatever, da da da, out, over the fence or whatever," and that they were doing some hitting practice or whatever. And I was like, "Oh, this is going to be terrible." Because I knew what was coming. I knew then, because once you get that feel of it, then it's like, that's what I'm going to be going for every time, and sure enough, like, you know, average goes down, strikeouts go up, whatever, it's like, because you go through that thing of like, okay, now that I know I can do it, I'm going to try to do it every time.
Right.
And that's just not, I mean, the game just doesn't work that way. And, but at the same time, I think it was a good learning opportunity for him because he was able to recognize and understand and go through that slump. Yes. And be frustrated, but at the same time, recognize that you didn't, you have to have the same approach every time and not just, go up there trying to hit a home run. And, but there was some growing pains in there. And, but again, that developing that skill set mentally and being able to work through some of that stuff is good for them in the long run, especially if they're able to, I guess learn from it and grow from it and not, not get too down on themselves and keep building that confidence. So, but anyway, sounds like you're doing some good things with that. So just in general, can you kind of just then basically just tell us specifically, okay, what your program is, the name, all that stuff, and just kind of what people could do to get in touch with it and just some of the just basics of it, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I started to put this all together about a year ago, after I went through my, I guess not an episode with my son, but I'm like, I need to start, I can help kids, So what I did is I put together an online program because obviously I'm full-time scout. I'm on the road 10 months out of the year. I'm like, I'm going to build something online where people can just go at their own pace. So what I did is I teach lessons, coach a lesson in a video. I give them a couple questions, like a little quiz after the video that they go through, and then a little PDF form to just answer a couple questions. And so I created a video per week. So it's 52 videos. It's an online membership, so it renews yearly. We update videos, and then the player has access to me through email. And then if they really want to have Zoom calls like we're doing here, that's a whole side deal. So I created that online, so people can do that. It's $199 for the year, which I believe is extremely fair.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I basically become their online coach. And a lot of parents were asked, like, well, what do you do? What do you teach? So I also created a free 4-video course. So when people don't know about me yet or what I do or teach, I highly recommend doing that first. Dive into that. It's 4 videos. So you watch the video, and I filmed this during the pandemic. So there's things on procrastination. I have a 20-minute video on a scout's view. One of the biggest questions I get as a scout is, what do you guys look for in a player? So I kind of go through all of that from a pitcher standpoint, a position player standpoint, and then I introduce the program. So that's an introduction, and they're highly HD videos. I got the green screen behind me. They're really nicely done. But yeah, so I just teach, and I let the kids go at their own pace. And then they email me their questions, and then we can have some dialogue back and forth. Obviously, the biggest, and I think the best way to go about is one-on-one calls like we do here. Starting to do team calls, kind of putting that all together right now throughout this summer, where it's just more personal. It's one-on-one. I can dive in exactly to what we want to work on. But yeah, that's a way to start. They can do the free course, sign up for that. If they like what they see, then they can sign up for the full 52-week course.
Cool. That's awesome. So, and then another thing you're doing like some interviews just with like players, coaches, that kind of stuff. So is there like a a method to that, or that's just fun stuff, or are you trying to get some
Yeah.
principles? What kind of things are you doing with that?
Yeah, I wanted to. I think one of the hardest things for a young, let's say, high school kid, and even college kids, is being open enough to talk about this stuff,
Mhm.
right? So when all this stuff happened 3 months ago, I was like, I'm going to start a YouTube channel and just start interviewing, just like you and I are doing. Just start talking to guys and getting it out in the open of like, hey, what's your story? What were your struggles? And so I'm talking to major league players, scouts, people of kind of all walks of life, that you kind of boil it all down is we all have our stuff,
Mhm.
right? We're all going through life at the same time, and we all have our struggles. So, and the feedback I've gotten from kids, I'm like, man, these are great. Like, I didn't realize that. Like, I just did a call with Shea Hillenbrand, who was a all-star, 2-year all-star, and he almost killed himself. He was about a day or two away from taking his life. That's how serious things got for him. Now, and that's not my expertise by any means, but he's now able to talk about it because he was able to get over it. But just little struggles, and then opening up and just being more vulnerable to discuss, like, hey man, we're going through struggles. Let's talk about this.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm sure we could talk a ton on that. I mean, you're using some key words for me, like right now, struggles, vulnerability, stuff that is difficult, and especially as guys, I mean, we have a harder time with that because, like you said before, just that notion of weakness. I think you had something on your Facebook page about this, but I watched the Roy Halladay,
Yeah.
documentary, and I mean, whether that's pressure, whether that's struggles, the pressure to perform. I mean, obviously, he was taking a ton of painkillers to perform and to kind of get through. But also at the same time, it's like that's, it didn't seem like, people like were talking about that kind of stuff, or it's uncomfortable to talk about where you're struggling or why you're struggling or what's kind of going through that. And that's a hard mountain for some people to get over, and to just reach out for help, and to be able to, in whatever state, with sports, wherever we're at. I mean, it can be difficult,
Right.
but obviously you have to start having the dialogues to get to the place where people feel more and more comfortable wanting to talk about those kinds of things, right?
Yeah, I agree. As males, right, we have egos, right? We're tough. We're alpha males, all that stuff. We help support our families. We have kids. We want to be strong and tough for them. But man, there's also times when you got to cry with them too.
Yeah.
And I'm a huge weeper at times when it comes to, when you start talking about Jesus, like I'm crying. It's but yeah, it's just cool that people are starting to open up. And I was a teammate of Roy Halladay's for just a little bit. We were actually drafted the same year. He was a little bit, a few picks behind me in that draft. But yeah, he went through those struggles, and we, nobody really knew about it. I just did a call with Josh Towers, who lives here locally, was on that staff in part of their rotation, and we talked about Roy, in that regard. Like, yeah, man, it was, he went through things that we just didn't know about, and I think ones that were really close to him knew. They kept it really kind of close and knit tight, and then kind of it just got to the point where his wife was like, we can't do this anymore. Like, you better get some help or we're gone.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a lot to handle, and I think he had some. I wasn't able to see it yet, but my understanding, he had some huge perfectionism to him.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we all have that. We all want to do well, and sometimes trying to be perfect is probably not the best answer.
Yeah, and I know we could be veering off a little bit, but I think one of the things I took from it too is like huge perfectionism, and then also too, it seemed like he kind of like lost himself once he kind of stepped away from the game. I don't know if you struggled with any of that, or if that was difficult for you when you finally decided, okay, I'm done. Was that a hard thing for you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because now, so the difference is, and Shea Hillenbrand mentioned this too. Like, Shea Hillenbrand, these are Roy Halladay's a Hall of Famer. So
yeah.
If you look at monetarily, and they had millions in the bank, right? That they're set for life. They don't have to do anything ever again. But everything they've known, it comes to a complete halt. In my case, and I think really in most cases, when I was done, I was 30. Like, I'm 42 right now. I was ideally hoping to just retire like a couple years ago. I felt like I had so many injuries that happened that I'm like, I'm done at 30, really? And I still played 13 years.
Mhm.
So even at age 30, I was like, that's it, right? That went like that, and like, now what the heck am I going to do? So yeah, when I was, not getting paid very much at that time. So now I'm thinking like, okay, I got a wife, I got 4 kids. I'm not making the money I did now, so now what do I do? So all those thoughts creep in, and I think I was also pretty good, and I don't know if it's whether it's religious background, but I also knew that baseball wasn't who I am, right? It's what I did.
Yeah.
Right. So that's a big piece when I talk with kids, like, yeah, you just play baseball. You can't put everything into one basket, because if it's taken from you today or next week, then who are you? Right. So that's a big part of it. And I felt like I was pretty good at that, knowing like I'm not just a baseball player. Like there's much more to me than that. So when kids can start to understand that perfectionism kind of starts to dwindle back a little bit.
Yeah. No, it's a great point. Just as far as like your identity. And I mean, I see that a lot with people in whatever kind of aspect of life or whatever, whether it's sports or other things. It's like when you get too wrapped up in one specific identity, it's like it's dangerous, because yeah, if that goes away, then who are you? What are you? And then what's the world going to be now? And it can send people into some dark places and not. Yeah. And I imagine with athletes, it's a little bit more challenging, or can be, just because like you said, they're, I mean, I look at my son that's playing baseball too. It's like, I mean, it's like practice every day, you're thinking, so it is a lot of your life, but you do have to have that separation, but when it does, when it's over, it's, there's some there's some things you got to do.
Yeah, it's hard. When you finally, like I said, I was 30 when I was done. When the day I decided to hang up the cleats, man, it's heart wrenching. You're so emotional about it. At that point, I had 4 kids. We were about to have we already had our 4th kid. He was still pretty young. My daughter, she was young. And I was just like, this is it. My body's beat up. It hurts to get out there, and and then you make that decision, and then obviously you try to do that maybe in a prayerful sense and make sure you're getting the right answers, but yeah, it's really hard.
Yeah. So this is a selfish note for me, because I mentioned earlier, well, when we were talking before the podcast, I was mentioning I was from Canada. So you did play in Toronto, right?
For 1 week.
Oh, for 1 week. Oh, that was it. Oh. Well, then I don't.
Very short-lived, yeah.
How was it? How was Toronto?
It was cool. Yeah, I mean, it was so fast, I didn't even get to really experience it.
Okay.
I stayed in the Sky Dome for a couple of days.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a whole other thing. When you get called up from AAA, you think you're going to be there like the rest of the year. You're like, sweet, I'm called up. I finally get my chance again. But in the back of your mind, you kind of forget. You're like, oh, I'm just coming up for so-and-so that got injured. I might only be here for a week or 3 days or 2 weeks. And I moved my whole family up there, right? We get an apartment in Toronto. Mm-hmm. And then it was literally, I think, a week or 8 days later, back to AAA.
Oh.
So it's super hard on the family, super hard on the wife. It's not the glamorous life that a lot of us see. Right. Now, when we have a lot of local players like Bryce Harper, Chris Bryant, Joey Gallo. These are, I mean, they could be Hall of Fame players. They're making millions of dollars. Things are going great for them, but they also have that stress and that pressure to perform at that high level. So that kind of never ends.
Yeah. No, it's a good point. But I guess you don't really necessarily think about that side. I wouldn't think that you would, jump in and just like sort of, move my family, and then now I'm not there anymore. So
yeah, and And the wives had to do everything too, because you were assigned to that place the next day or two, and they're just like, well, I guess I'll just pack up all the bags.
Yeah, hopefully there's some therapy for wives in those situations.
Right, no doubt. I think wives writing books and stuff and experiences. I have a friend that's written one. I haven't read it yet, but I'm sure they have some crazy stories.
Yeah. No, I'm sure that's not an easy life for them as well too. So, but well, Chad, I appreciate you coming on and sharing some of your insights, and definitely really, I guess, grateful for what you're doing with kids and stuff. And kind of, I think that's definitely an added component that kids need in the sport, to be able to have that mental kind of training and stuff just to fill in the gaps with, just the performance side of things and how to fine tune that and work through those things in a better way. So I think it's great what you're doing. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet. It's been a lot of fun. I'm getting some good feedback, and it's always fun to work with kids. I guess I should tell you actually where you can go to the website. So the website's just mentaledge.training.
Okay.
That's where you can get the free course. You like the free course, you don't even have to do the free course. If you want to sign up, be a member, you can do that right away too. The YouTube channel is Mental Edge Training Coach. And then for a lot of the people that are signing up to do one-on-one calls or team calls, you can just email me. And that email is chad@mentaledge.coach.
Okay, cool. And I'll put that all in the notes too. So it'll be in the notes as well. So
awesome.
Have that. So, all right. Well, thanks again for coming on, and hopefully we'll talk soon, maybe in a different capacity.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate having me on. This has been great.
All right. Thanks.